I'm WG, and yes, you've read that correctly, they buffed SERENIEL, so let me explain to you exactly what they did and how you can make the most out of this buff. So this right here is the entirety of the SERENIEL buff, but what I ask of you is that you give me the next few minutes to explain to you why this is way more impactful than you would think on first reading or in general. So, what they did is they changed interactions of SERENIEL's Pale Shooting Star. So the Pale Shooting Star, her 2-cost card that can activate either 3 or 5 homing lasers, depending on E0 or E1, has now been changed in comparison to how it was the last 2 weeks, right? And yeah, what exactly did they change? First off, homing laser else, which means the homing lasers created by card effects, not the Epiphany one, were getting exhausted completely, regardless of remaining exhaust count. We'll obviously go over these points in detail so you understand what's going on. And then the Epiphany effect of homing laser sometimes fades to trigger. Doesn't seem like a lot, but has some pretty crazy implications, so let's get into the detail. Alright, so Pale Shooting Star. If you have a deck with 1, 2, 3, however many Pale Shooting Stars, that deck just became stronger because Pale Shooting Star itself as a card became stronger. Furthermore, if your SERENIEL is E1, she also gained a even bigger benefit due to Pale Shooting Star benefiting from the Epiphany. And now let's talk about the least impactful one of the two changes, and that is, for example, as far-ranging as making this singular Epiphany here, for example, way more useful. The problem with this Epiphany is you can create 2 homing lasers and they can have exhaust 4. If you then play out these homing lasers, they're going to go into the graveyard being exhaust 3. You then use a Pale Shooting Star, boom, they're gone. Poof. So the ability to keep these homing lasers in play, to get them back on break, to have them in your graveyard massively went up, right? Like, there was an interaction. I didn't even know about the fact that they got completely exhausted, but it is massive for this Shining Core. And then another one of those for which it is actually quite impactful is going to be this specific one right here. Homing laser 1 cost. It creates 2 homing lasers in the discard pile. Now, if you create something in the discard pile, that means that it's not going to have to be used to get there, meaning you were completely exhausting a homing lasers that had exhaust 2, now going down to exhaust 0 with just using the Pale Shooting Star. And that is also true as well for the Plasma Missile Epiphany right here, which created 3 homing lasers in your draw pile, and they all had exhaust 2. And if you think about it then, because the Pale Shooting Star uses it from draw pile and graveyard, you would have been, or you could have had the interaction where a Pale Shooting Star completely deletes the homing lasers from your deck after just 1 insta-action instead of 2. So that is just the implication for the first one, but the second one is even more impactful. So to understand the second part, you need to know what happened before. Before this, Pale Shooting Star only fully triggered the effect of the very first homing laser that it triggers. Meaning that, for example, if I were to play my my Pale Shooting Star and I have 3 of these homing lasers played, it gave me the vulnerability stacks, right? And I used my Pale Shooting Star. Before the fix, you only gained the 2 vulnerability from the very first laser, because only the first laser was triggered fully. Now you're going to get all the vulnerability stacks from all the lasers. And where this becomes even more obvious, even more clear, is when you take a look at this. What this meant is you paid 2 cost for the Pale Shooting Star to trigger however many AP homing lasers you had in your graveyard, and you only got 1 AP back. You got 1 AP back for the first homing laser played. This is now different. Now it triggers the AP Epiphany on every single homing laser in the graveyard, meaning that this card actually goes from a 2 cost to, if you have 4 of the homing lasers in your deck, to a negative 2 cost Pale Shooting Star. And that is just at the base level of interaction between. So this is just going to be a simple example to show you how impactful this is, but keep in mind, the more copies of an AP homing laser, the crazier the scaling of this interaction. But what we're going to be doing here is we'll be just attacking as usual. we play out our homing lasers, and you see we go up 2 AP because we played them out twice. Now we're then also going to get our homing lasers in here so we can get some more break in, as well as get in the cobalt light. So now there's also an important interaction you need to learn about Pale Shooting Star, and that is, if Pale Shooting Star is not the card to break the enemy, you still get all your homing lasers back on hand. The difference here is that if Pale Shooting Star breaks, the homing lasers first go to your hand and then get activated out of, like kind of out of your hand state by a Pale Shooting Laser. But if Pale Shooting Laser doesn't break the enemy, look at this. And especially also pay attention to our AP. We are on 2 AP. Now all the homing lasers we have in our graveyard get triggered. We get 1 AP from breaking the target. And look, we have our homing lasers back. Meaning that overall, just through this simple interaction with just 2 lasers, the value of these homing lasers is 6 AP. Because we were able to use each one of those 3 times. And that is just limited by the fact that we only had 2 AP lasers. So at minimum, every single divine version of homing laser just become massively stronger, because these epiphanies now trigger for multiple copies and for every single one rather than just the first used. And now something I can't 100% confirm, but I wouldn't put past the devs or the game at the moment. You can let me know down in the comments below if you have more information or even proof on it. And that is the fact that some of these homing lasers might not have even triggered if they weren't the first one. Like for example, let's say you have a homing laser here that would only give you 3 afterglow on the first one, not the 3 afterglow on the other ones, because of it being like a homing laser epiphany, or potentially this 1-cost homing laser not actually creating 2 further homing lasers in your discard pile if it was getting triggered as the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, whatever homing laser itself. Same is true with, for example, the move all homing lasers L in graveyard to hand. So I hope I was able to like make clear how impactful this actually is, and how this is way bigger than what the patch notes actually let you first expect. So let's end this off with, I think it's SERENIEL solo with the buffed Pale Shooting Star. Alright, so let's do this last showcase here, and let me actually explain what you're looking at. So these 2 homing lasers come from the E2, giving us 2. One of the, all these 4 homing lasers were actually drawn at the start of our turn, making it 6 cards, and then we only drew 4 more cards right here. But something that's actually important for you to know as well is if on your turn 1 you draw a homing laser, you also get an additional draw, regardless of it being homing laser normal or homing laser L, so long as you have the E1, making you, for example, draw 6 cards instead of just 5. But yeah, so let's just get our homing lasers out of the way normally, which is why we start with the you could say weaker versions of the homing lasers, then use our vulnerability at turn start move to hand homing lasers. And then here you see that with our Pale Shooting Star we do not end up breaking the enemy, meaning we hit the enemy. We use all 4 of our all 4 of our fancy homing lasers as well, once again pushing the vulnerability stacks up. Then E6 here, this is the effect triggers. For every break bar we deal 80% damage, but honestly it isn't even that relevant to the end result here. And then we're going to just use our homing lasers to apply a stack of vulnerability, which we can then consume with the plasma missile, which deals damage based on the tenacity bar amount taken away from the enemy. As you see here, we crit for a sweet 3000. And then we're just once again going to go through our homing lasers and then use as our final card the Cobalt Light, and that is a pretty sweet 22,533 damage from just SERENIEL alone, aggressively tickling the boss. So there's probably some even more interesting implications out there, maybe some more viable decks or different things that now became a lot stronger. But hey, at the end of the day, the main takeaway here is not only is Pale Shooting Star a lot better, but even minute things can have a major impact so long as the implications line up. And with that one, I'm out. Peace!